Welcome back to the Restaurant Technology Guys podcast. Thank everyone out there for joining us. As I say each and every time, I know you've got lots of choices, so thank you guys for hanging out with us. Today, we are going to live in the world of credit cards and tokens and all things credit card and security and all of the different things that we need to be dealing with for omni-channel. I'd like to introduce Travis. Travis, can you let everybody know who is Travis before we jump into what Travis gets to do for a living?
Hey Jeremy, yes, thank you very much. I'm Travis. I'm based out of Edmonton, Canada, and I'm not jumping right into what I do. I love software, I love helping people, and I love how those two things play together.
I love it. And a little bit of background, Travis, just because, again, as I sit and listen to or talk to some of our listeners, they'll share, where's Travis from? Or talk to me a little bit about the background, because I'm guessing this isn't your first foray into software, into technology. So give me a little bit of background on where you came from
No,
before we jump into what Very Good Security does.
yeah, absolutely. So I'm for a long time I've been a software engineer. I've worked in the Linux stack, I've worked in Windows stacks, and I've been very deep into that world. And then I moved over into the sales side of the house about midway into my career, and like it started learning more of the business side of things, just understanding the way that people think and understanding why people were buying the thing that I was building. I think that's what I was curious about. Is I got tired of just building it. I wanted to understand the reason that people actually cared. And then out of that, the those two things, like those two sides of the house, have also gotten to work in implementation and work with some large enterprises and like really understand the way that businesses think and the way that they what's important to them and how they use software and how they use in this specific realm how they use tokens and tokenization to help increase their offering to their customers.
I love working with developers that actually have talked with a customer or talked with an end user to figure out what that looks like. Because oftentimes they're like, "Oh, it meets spec. This is what the spec said," and that didn't really actually meet what the customer needed. I don't care that it meets spec. I don't care that it met the requirements that are on the sheet of paper, regardless of what software methodology you're using. It doesn't work to fill the customer's needs. And we often talk about on the show, technology for technology's sake is worthless. Technology that solves business problems is hugely important, and making sure that you can solve it with business problems, personal problems, and productivity problems, whatever those things might be. And Travis, you get a chance to work in kind of I don't say a unique area, because it's not really that unique, but it is definitely something that is underrepresented in the restaurant space. I would say I lived in the space for the last 30 years. And while I think it's gaining momentum, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about where you're at now and what you guys have been up to at your current role.
Yeah, thanks. So I guess just to start off with who VGS is and where VGS fits into the whole merchant or restaurant space. We're the world's largest tokenization provider. And what that means is when credit cards are entering our customers' network, we ensure that all of that data is tokenized and before it reaches them. So by default, they are always PCI compliant, and then they can operate on that data with the token versus using the original data. So it's a lot more maneuverable. I was just talking with a customer yesterday about they were singing the praise, so to speak, about how much easier it was to maneuver with VGS versus having to do this all themselves. And with that, yeah, that's where VGS fits in, and where I am in that is I help with the implementation side of the things. I'm head of client operations. That's everything from making sure that what we're selling fits a real need with the solutions architecture side of the house, and then implementing it. We work with a wonderful team of project managers and solutions engineers, and then obviously technical support. So making sure that whatever we implement, the customer stays.
Thank you for that explanation. And I think there's two paths that I'd love to go down. And so the first is, you talked about security. And so let's talk about security and how critical that is to a brand's reputation, and why something like BGS is so critical to understand why tokenizing the card and getting the cardholder data out of the environment is so critical. And then later in the conversation, we'll talk about omni-channel and how tokens give you the ability to have guests be able to do order online, pick up in store, and what does that look like, and all of those different things. But let's start down that security path. Travis, if you wouldn't mind, talk to me a little bit about kind of the standard non-VGS implementation that you guys walk into, because I think all too often, owners of restaurants, owners of brands, marketing companies, and such, they don't understand how much risk their business is at in certain environments because they want the operational solution, they want the guest satisfaction solution, but they don't completely understand what impact that could have if they don't do things properly. So, would you mind unpacking that a little bit for me?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a fun question. So let's say VGS is introduced to an organization, and there's really two sides of the fence. One where they're in danger, and the other one where they're limited in their ability to maneuver. And the one where they're in danger is where they're handling customer data themselves, and it's in its raw form. And that's either going to mean that they're under PCI, like they've gone through the PCI rigor, and they house their systems, and it's a very expensive way to do things these days. Is like actually go through the PCI compliance yourself, and it's also when you start dealing with risk teams, it's just not worth it. It's like a lot of like the reason that you would do that is so that you have the ability to choose different vendors, you have the insights over the actual car number that you're using. You can find the issuing banks of your customers, but that's not necessarily worth it to a large organization who's more concerned about brand reputation and having
Hmm.
things be stolen. And clear, obviously, if you get all these customers to sign up for your app, and then the data that they put into your app gets stolen by a group of hackers, that's incredibly detrimental to your customers and to how people perceive you. And so that's one, that's where they're in danger. The other one is where they're limited, and that's where they're using a single vendor. Or so they're, let's say you're using one payment service provider to process all of your payments, or and then so now all of a sudden you're locked into the technology for online e-commerce. Maybe you have multiple brands that are associated, but they you don't want them to all have the same processor, or for contractual reasons you just don't. Let's go at it from the perspective of they have multiple processors with this. And so as soon as they have a different processor in store and online, and
Hmm.
that's usually a technology question of who has the best offering for what, who has the best contracts for what. Maybe it's a geography thing. Like in one country you can have one processor, in another country you can have a different processor, or online you can have a separate processor altogether. What we're finding is customers with that problem, they don't have the ability to tell when a customer is in store versus when they're online. How do they track that customer all the way through?
Yep.
So if there's a customer coming in, let's say I sign up, let's say I go to ABC ABC Coffee House, just like a random restaurant, and I every day I go in there and I order my mocha, and then years down the road I go in and I download their app, and I put my SIM credit card into their app. If those processors are completely different, then they have no way to correlate that. They have no way of knowing that I'm actually a long-term customer and this is exactly what I want to order.
Yeah,
And
without
so
tying without tying that customer on the card number side together.
exactly. So where we come in is we help the customers, or we help the end customer get a better experience, because
Hmm.
like I sign up for the app, and then the company already knows who I am based off of the card number, and then that information can be used to market to me and say, hey, like you might like this as well, you might, and also here's your entire order history. It's a lot you can do once you get control over the data versus when it's all stuck with one customer,
Yeah,
one
so I'm gonna
processor.
tease out the whole security thing because again, my wife recently got hacked on the app at her favorite boba place. My 8-year-old daughter loves to go to this boba place up the road, and somehow the hacker got into their data and started charging the card on a regular basis, and it was small increments, but at this point now my wife will no longer put her card number into the app, and quite frankly has considered, and there's been times she has moved to another brand because of that. Are you finding that these types of things are still happening? Because I'll go talk with restaurant brands and they're like, you're kidding me. People are still getting card numbers. People still have clear text data being transmitted or these kind of things. And so I guess educate our listeners a little bit. And for those that are watching on video, they're probably going to see Travis's smirk because at the end of the day, I think all too often we have this false sense of security that all of this stuff is heavily encrypted and you can't get into it. And the truth is that's not the case in so many of these types of environments because of one thing or another. Sometimes it's operational. We can talk down the operational path and kind of that. And then there's other times that just you're either uneducated about it or the tech doesn't support it. And so you leave things in clear text. So how often are you running into that, and what is that impact on the security side if and when brands get hacked?
Yeah, good question. So I'm finding where companies are just fully non PCI compliant, like they're just not they're they just aren't caring about where the PCI data is at all. That's rare, but it like I did have a situation recently where a new tech lead took over a project, and it wasn't at VGS. It was at another company, but they took over this old product that had been operating for a decade, and then as they dug into it, they realized that none of the PCI data was being stored correctly. It was a rush to get VGS implemented into this old tech stack, which was built in, I think it was 2008. And then they had to almost overnight implement this solution, which is where VGS shines, because then we come in, we drop into either side, and we just protect that environment.
Hmm.
And then, so yeah, it definitely does happen where companies are just like, maybe for legacy reasons, they haven't updated their systems. That's typically what's happened. New things are almost, they're often built with things like PCI in mind, specifically with VGS.
Hmm.
And then, but that's a problem I've seen.
The other thing that I often find when I'm looking at these things, and I'm certain our listeners will resonate with this, is that at some point somebody made a decision that says we'll patch this, we'll fix this, but in order to get live, we've got to get this data in clear text to be in this environment, and we'll just put the security in place. But now a new CMO comes in, a new CIO comes in, they don't know that stuff's there. They're filling out the SAQ, the self assessment questionnaire, or they're even doing potentially some on site audits. And that is not part of the PCI environment for whatever reason, because your auditors often don't know. And if they're just trying to get a paycheck, they may or may not ask those things. And so what I'm finding is that people think that it's that way. And it's only until they get breached that they then get to a point where they're like, oh crap, I had no idea this was there. Or yeah, we never got around to that project because everybody's overworked and everybody has more projects, especially on the IT side, than they have time to deal with. And so marketing's coming to them with a pile of another 5 projects. Operations has got another 3 projects they need to do. Finance has got 2 projects they need to do. And they go, hey, we got it live. Let's go. Let's move on to the next project. And they never circle back. And help our listeners, obviously we'd love for them to engage with VGS and see if this is a solution for them. But what should they be looking for? What are the types of things that you look for when you're asking these questions? I'm an owner, I'm a CEO, I've got a brand of 10 restaurants right now. I'm that ABC coffee shop. I've got 10 coffee shops, and I'm now sitting down on my one on one with my IT guy. What types of questions should they be asking them to think about whether VGS or a competitive solution would be in that environment? Because I think helping them to get to a place where they can get educated about this would be really critical to seeing that there truly is a problem and that they need to implement a solution post haste.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so there's a few different things that I would ask people to just to be thinking about, and one is the most obvious, which is just know the flow of data, like understand really well how data is entering your network and how data is exiting, and have that documented. And that's where VGS comes in and helps. Okay, so there's all these different ingress points into your network, and they have PCI data. And I'm sorry, we're focusing on PCI, but it's not always PCI data. It
Yep.
could be customer phone numbers. It could be email
Staff
addresses.
member,
It could be
contact
staff.
info, social
Exactly.
security
Social
numbers.
security number. Exactly. Like all of these things are considered sensitive, even if they're not PCI per se. And so all of those data ingress points you have to be aware of, and you have to understand how they're interacting with your applications. I've worked with some very large vendors, or some very large merchants in the past, who were just storing credit card numbers in plain text
Hmm.
in their system, and I was shocked. But that's how it's always worked, and they didn't feel like they could change it at this point. So that's where we step in. So understanding the data, and then also understanding, like, on the other side of the house, like, we've talked about how to secure the data, but then also, if you, let's say, you don't have access to the data, you're using a PSP and you're just getting their token, how would your life change if you did have access to the data? And like, how much control would you have in that case? Because that's the other side. That's one is the security, and then the other one is offering the maneuverability between vendors, and
Hmm.
what that turns into in reality is you can perform more fraud checks. You can perform KYC on certain customers in different situations. You can have a multi-processor orchestration solution. So rather than just trying to perform a payment with one PSP, you can send it to a bunch of different PSPs, and or you could utilize the network technologies like network tokens and get the updated PAN so that your payments don't stop working 1 year down the line when the card expires. So yeah, those are the kinds of things. It's like, how do you protect your system? And if your system is protected, are you limited by the way it's protected right now?
Yeah. And I'd love to, I think that's the next thread, Travis, that I'd love to go down is that whole idea that says, what do you get when you tokenize this data? Because I think again, I think we all as consumers, because we work on apps like Amazon or Walmart.com, these things, we expect them to know everything about us. But in online and offline commerce, it's tough. And most systems were designed for one or the other, and loyalty tries to bridge that gap. Some CDP solutions try and bridge that gap. We've had multiple loyalty providers and other solution providers, but one thing that stays pretty consistent is how are you paying for this product? And you typically have 1 to 3 cards that you're paying for your offline and online products in any normal consumer environment. And so talk to me about the portability of that before we jump into kind of the flexibility of even being able to do multi-processor and all of that, because I think that also is very underutilized. But the portability and the understanding that you are who you are because I'm tying your customer record to your transaction record to your payment record is data that the best of the best have, but most don't.
Yeah, and that's what we've seen a lot actually, is like the largest merchants. Let's say the largest merchants have gone through the rigor of creating their own PCI environment, and so they do have that data and they can correlate. What we're actually seeing, like the trend that we're seeing, is even those merchants don't want to maintain the PCI data, the PCI environment anymore, and they're trying to offload it.
Hmm.
They're trying to get an off network vault to simplify their storage and simplify their compliance burden. But yeah, what we've seen with the that's with the largest players, and then with the mid market, like with those medium sized restaurants, with those medium sized merchants, what we're seeing is even they want to have insights into their customers. They want to know more about their demographic. They want to know how many times, like Jeremy, how many times you are going into the restaurant and making purchases. What are your movement patterns? How can they better market to you if they roll something out? How does that new offering that they're giving, how does that play with their historical customers? And yeah, it's definitely like a ton more insight, because at the end of the day, like my credit card number is tied to me. I use it almost every day to make purchases, and that's one source of truth. And if you can correlate that between in person and online transactions
Yep.
for that omni channel, that's where it becomes really interesting for restaurants.
It's funny. That was actually where I was going. Is there's also this, and retailers, grocers, restaurants have struggled with kind of the buy online, pick up in store. But now I get to the store and my wife calls me while I'm driving to the store and says, "I didn't know Johnny was staying over for dinner. Can you pick up another sandwich for Johnny?" Now I got to pull out a second card. But these things happen. They happen in life. And if I was just going there 30 years ago, I didn't have the ability to order online and pick up in store. I just went to the store, I called the store, and I paid when I got there. Now people are on the go. They're ordering from the app. They go in and pick up their family pack for the 4 of them, but then somebody else is staying over. And now you got to figure out, how do I add to that order without necessarily, or I've sent my teenage son to go pick up the food because I'm not door dashing and he doesn't have a credit card in his pocket to pay for that additional meal. Talk me through how this omni-channel experience is capable once you get to this vault concept, because now I should be able to pick up that transaction in store, go add to it, recharge that same card because you've now tied that card to that transaction. Talk me through what that looks like.
Yeah, okay, so that's really cool. So let's say in that kind of situation where a customer is paying and then they want to modify that transaction down the road, that's where tokenization comes into handy. Let's say you pay up front and then you actually load your card into an environment, then any modifications can still be tied to that card, to that transaction down the road. And then you can, like, it gives the business a lot of control over the experience that they want to give their customers. And then what we also see is like QR based payments, where
Yep.
you're in the store and you want to actually pay by QR versus pay by versus pay by traditional credit card, or maybe you want to tie those two. And then, so those are the kind of offerings that you can begin to that you can begin to see with that. And the other thing that I'd say is what we've seen customers do, or what we've seen, let's say, different processors do, is that they want to give instant rewards to customers. In your situation, they made the payment online, and then they go in store and they, let's say they do have their credit card, they want to make a payment. That transaction can instantly be associated to their account, simply because they made that payment in store, and
Hmm.
that all goes directly into the merchants, like into the restaurant's data warehouse, and they can update their they can update their rewards based off of that. And so it gives way more control over the customer, and what or it gives way more control to the merchant, and a way better user experience to the customer.
Okay. I got two other trains of thought that I want to go down before we adjourn for the day. Portability. A lot of times, and I say portability, oftentimes people, processors, because it's part of their value proposition, will offer these services, but then the customer is locked into that processor because now they own the token versus the customer owning the token. And so, for those that aren't watching on video, I got a little bit of a smile. So, talk me through why having a third party token is better than having a token offered by the credit card processor at the time. Talk me through many reasons. I'm certain there's lots, but for me, the big one is the customer is your customer as much as they are whoever the processor's customer is. And they're more likely your customer because you're the one delivering the goods and services. They're just taking the payment.
Absolutely. So when a customer comes to you in let's say you're using a standard, like a standard PSP tokenization service, and you aren't really thinking about what that entails. And when you get that value, or that token from the PSP, it can only ever be used with them. And what that means is you are very locked into their environment, and
Yep.
migrating off of them is a whole that's a large scale project, just changing PSPs. And it also means that if that PSP is down, then you're hooped. That's you're like, if you are fully tied, your revenue is tied to that processor.
Yep.
And what VGS does is we allow merchants to take control of that data, and they're really own their customer in a very practical sense, which is they're owning the payment credential. And so it's no longer the PSP who has access to that, but it's them. And if they want to add on a new payment service provider, and this might be to change geography. Let's say company is doing well in the US, they want to branch into Canada, they want to branch into Mexico or into Europe. They can add in the processor that's best for them there. And then using the same data collection platform, it's going to drastically reduce the amount of work it takes to onboard that new processor, and really simplify their overall architecture, because it's all being stored the same way. They're just sending it to a different third party. In this case, that would be the PSPs.
Yeah, no, and I love that thought. And I think all too often we get stuck with guest experience that's bad because tech hasn't thought through these things. And so it's this, oh, I can't use this payment here because or even the offline, online. Some online providers for online ordering only support certain processors, certain POS in store only support another processors. And so you've got to figure out how to tie those things together. Last kind of train of thought, talk me through some customer success stories. Talk me through some food service operators. What did life look like for them before VGS? And then where have you seen them really expand using your guys' offering to help customer experience and our business experience and make the business better? So I know I'm putting you on the spot, but I love hearing success stories, and our customers, the listeners to the show, constantly come back and go, when you shared this and this about this customer, it really resonated with me. So if you can come up with one or two quick stories, that would be awesome if you could share that.
Yeah, that sounds great. So the first one that comes to mind is probably it's one of the world's largest QSRs. And what we do for them is we enable their marketing department to get really deep insights into customer movement, and into what customers are looking for. And what that turns out, and what that looks like at a technical level, is every day we are receiving batch data with the card numbers in them from all of their different processors. This is for multiple countries. So at the end of the day, or multiple times throughout the day, we will receive settlement files, and then we will tokenize all of the card numbers in those settlement files and forward them on to the QSR. And then that restaurant at that point can ingest that data into their data warehouse, and then they can match up the online versus the in-store transactions, and they can say, oh, this is what Jeremy likes.
Mhm.
And if we can target Jeremy at this time, like on Fridays, he really loves this, like X. And then so then they can market to you very specifically like that. And it allows them to get really creative with how they understand their customers. And yeah, that's a pretty cool use case. And just to see how that's developed in the world, and like enabling those marketing insights.
Well, and at the end of the day, you've talked about customer experience, and now delivering to that customer something that might be relevant to them is really critical. For so long, marketing has all been about let me just put out a message and hopefully the message resonates with people. But as we've gotten to a more personalized world, people want messages. We're getting inundated with thousands of messages every day, tens of thousands of messages every day. And so the more relevant I can make it to Jeremy, father of four, married in this demographic that's looking for this. I just was sharing before we hit record. This past 5 days, I've been with my college age son, and my spend patterns were different. My traffic patterns were different. I went to some of the same brands that I go to at home, but it looked different. And my food consumption was different. Whereas my wife was home with the other kids and doing something different. And so, with that, being able to tie that data and then being able to give me a relevant offer would have been really critical to help them understand why and where what might have happened as it related to my patterns just even over the last week.
Yeah, that's absolutely what we're seeing. Is it's all about understanding the customer, and like from a marketing perspective, it's no longer just targeting everybody, it's targeting one person. Like they're targeting Travis or they're targeting Jeremy, and
Mhm.
it's I think that tokenization is, and like VGS has changed the kind of services that can be offered because of that. And they can now target one person, be like, we want to give this person a good experience, rather than saying we want to target this demographic. Even
Yep.
it's yeah, it's pretty remarkable on that front.
So I've now sat through this last 30 minutes and I'm like, I need what Travis has. What does it look like? What does the onboarding look like? What's the engagement look like? Do they just call you and say, Travis, can you install this tomorrow? Obviously, I know that's not true, but help me understand if I was a listener out there and I'm like, you know what, I got to have what VGS, that's what that stands for if I didn't say it already, what you guys have, what would an engagement look like? And what's an ideal customer for you guys to make sure that you guys are hitting the market and making some stuff happen? Anybody that's ever run a restaurant knows the craziness that happens during a meal period in a rush. One of our partners, Restaurant Technologies Total Oil Management Solution, is an end to end oil management system that delivers, filters, monitors, and recycles your cooking oil, taking one of the jobs that none of your team wants to do and takes it off your hands, allowing your team members to focus on their guest. Control the kitchen chaos with restaurant technologies and make your kitchen safer while maximizing your staff's time. The solution can be provided at no upfront cost. If you want to learn more, please check out rti-inc.com or call 888-796-4997.
Yeah, good question. So I think first thing should always be like come and talk to us and come and work with our payments experts and understand where VGS can fit in the flow and how we can help you. And then I like from an onboarding perspective, like that's my language. That's where I focus a lot of my time. Is from an onboarding perspective, we're going to dedicate resources to make sure that they're successful. Like our customers get good service. Our customers, we get introduced to the processors, and we manage that migration. Like there's typically a migration process that happens so that we can get all that data, and then we work very closely with the customer developer teams over the course of either weeks or months, depending on the client, making sure that they're tokenizing data correctly, they're PCI compliant in how they're doing it, or if it's not PCI, then they're just secure and they're protecting the SSNs correctly. SSNs are other data fields. And then, but yeah, it's a lot of working with our solutions architecture team and with a dedicated project manager, and just really building out that perfect payments flow for each business. I've worked here for a number of years, and it's always different. It seems
Mm.
it's never copy paste. There's always something unique that that a company's trying to do.
It's funny that you say that because I people that are outside of the industry are like, "Oh, it's just a restaurant. You just make some food and sell it to people." It is so complex, and whether you're talking about in store, above store, just across the board, there's so many different moving parts and pieces, and every deployment's in some different phase. Can you just give everybody the website for those that don't? And I'll throw it in the show notes. But if you can make sure that everybody knows where to go to engage with the team, that would be awesome.
Absolutely. You can go to VGS, yeah, and then from there you can get in touch with our team, and I'd be happy to meet with anyone.
Awesome. Travis, I appreciate you educating our listeners. I think it's, as I said at the onset, it's such an underutilized piece of tech that I think is going to become something ubiquitous that everybody's going to need. And as I often say at the end of these recordings, if you're not doing it, likely your competitor is. And so you better be aware that they're specifically marketing, specifically understanding the guest, specifically doing these things, not just from a security perspective, but also from a how do I engage with the guest and understand who they are and what they're doing. So thank you for spending time with us, educating us. To our listeners, guys, you guys have got lots of choices, so thanks for spending time. While you guys are checking out verygoodSecurity.com, if you haven't already done so, subscribe to the YouTube page, subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the newsletter. Love to bring you guys new content each week, and make it a great day.